Thank you. Let me just see. Let me test it.
There we go.
Using a desktop, but not my laptop, so I don't know that I'm going to get it to work. But um,
No worries. Give it a minute for people to start jumping on.
I could always print it.
We've technically started, so let's just say welcome to everyone, and we're just still waiting for a minute or two for more people who are logging on right now, and we'll begin shortly.
Awesome. Let's see. I see some familiar names that are here with us. That's great.
Can I get a list of people who are there? Can you just
Yeah,
screenshot it? I don't know how.
yeah, I can let you know. Okay. Should we rock and roll?
I think so.
Awesome. I can kickstart it right here. Welcome, everybody. This is our webinar tonight. We're here to discuss HB 1379. Also, excuse me, it is also known as the Foreign Funding Transparency and Accountability Act, which was recently passed in the Georgia House and moved up to the Senate. And it's a very, very, very interesting resolution that deserves a lot more credit than it deserves. You know, it deserves a lot of conversation around it because it is a landmark resolution when it comes to K to 12 advocacy. I'm Adar Rubin. I'm the Director of Mobilization for the End Jew Hatred Movement. I am joined by Gerard Filitti of the Lawfare Project, as well as one of the leading driving forces of this resolution itself out here in the state of Georgia, the legendary, the greatest, the queen herself, State Representative Esther Panich. So tonight we're just going to discuss the impact of the resolution, the legalities of it, you know, what will work and how we can effectively bring this resolution to your respective states, how you can mobilize to strategically push your elected officials to learn the ropes and learn all the skills needed to get this across the finish line, as this is something that has been widely discussed, the issue of foreign influence in our academia, whether it's on the campus front or it could be in the K to 12 front. Many states are very different. Some schools often, or some universities in particular, govern autonomously. But tonight we're going to tell the story of 1379, hear from one of the leading forces on the resolution herself, and you know, we're here to answer any questions you have regarding it, and I'm here to give you the skills as to what you need to do to bring it to your legislature. Gerard?
Well, thank you for that, Adar. And I think, well, and thank you, Representative Panich, for amazing legislation shepherding this through. I think we all heard over the past, I don't know how many years, that we have a problem with foreign funding in our education system, and we really do. Now, a lot of this has been reported as money that's going into colleges and universities. We've seen numbers from, let's name the country, Qatar, because it's a matter of record, that goes to the tune of billions of dollars to universities. But the problem is not just that. The problem is that money is also going to state institutions. It's going to state colleges, and more importantly, it's going to K to 12 schools. And that money usually comes with strings attached in the form of curriculums, in the form of teaching materials, in the form of things that teachers are learning. An example of how this money comes in is through teacher training programs that is funded by QFI, Qatar Foundation International, more often than not, which is registered in the United States, so it flies under the radar as a domestic corporation, even though it's controlled by the Qatari royal family. But this institution provides teacher training programs to teach K to 12 teachers how to teach the Middle East. And when you look at the materials, you will see the obvious. You will see maps that don't have Israel on it, that have Palestine. You will see sections that omit any reference to Jewish history or identity in the Middle East at all, not just in Israel, but anywhere else for that matter. You will see very biased, not just towards Jews, but also towards America, questioning democratic values, talking about the benefits of Islam, glorifying values that are in the Quran, and de-emphasizing a lot of the democratic norms that we take for granted. So these materials end up in schools either directly from QFI providing funding and materials, or through the indoctrination of, the training, which is really the indoctrination of teachers. And this is something that's not been as widely discussed or reported. So we see at the federal level, Section 117 of the Higher Education Act requires schools to disclose when they get money above a certain threshold from foreign sources. The problem there, and that there's been an amendment to that to lower that threshold for reporting requirement, the Deterrent Act, which was passed by the U.S. House, but is now stuck in the Senate. It hasn't been called up for a vote yet. So this is a federal law that already requires disclosure, that over the years it's been attempted to tighten that law to require more disclosure, but that simply has not happened yet. So this is why it's crucial for states to also get into this, like Georgia did, and start to figure out where foreign money is coming into state schools, into state functions. And I think Georgia did this beautifully, and Representative Panich will talk about it. But this is something that's very much needed, because the foreign influence that's coming in our schools cannot be overstated and cannot be understated, especially when it comes to K to 12. We've been looking at this at the Lawfare Project for years. FDD is issuing a report in the coming months that will be very worth looking for and reading, that really highlights how this money, how these funding sources are playing a role in K-12. So there is a lot that will be coming out that will help explain why Georgia is at the forefront of this effort. So that being said, I think Representative Panich, you can speak more about the bill and why this is such a great thing.
Well, thank you both for having me, and we can just dive right in. So, just like Gerard was saying, we've known that there has been money in Georgia schools, but we didn't know exactly how much and to whom, and was it just limited to the colleges? So, because many of us have realized that what we saw on campuses in the immediate aftermath of October 7th was not organic, and it seemed to be choreographed. All of a sudden, the same talking points are coming out all across the country, and it just seemed a little too convenient and not really like an organic protest. So the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, I followed them. I think they're awesome. They do the work. And I had heard that they were looking into to where Qatar and maybe other foreign actors were putting their money. And so we knew that they had been investing in colleges, but what we did not know until the report came out is that they were also investing in K through 12, specifically in Georgia public charter schools. So those are taxpayer-funded schools, and there was no real reporting requirement to them. And in fact, the way FDD found these is through open records requests. So Georgia has a strong law in favor of transparency, so they were able to get reports back, but they filed hundreds, if not thousands, across the country and several hundred in Georgia. So this, as they were getting information in, they started to do more of the research. And what they found was shocking. The most activist campus after October 7th is Georgia State University, which is located in Atlanta, about a couple blocks from the Capitol. And huge. Turns out they were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from Qatar. And then there was money going to what's called Amana Academy, which is a Fulton County, which is the largest county in Georgia, and the county I represent, part of the county I represent, Amana Academy, which is a Fulton County public charter school. So my kids went to a Fulton County public charter high school, and this is no different. This is just for non-high schoolers. So when that report came out, we were all kind of surprised. And I immediately put it out on my Twitter that look what FDD just found. I had at the time less than 12,000 followers. I'm not, that popular. And all of a sudden, within hours, the Qatari ambassador to the United States himself decided to come at me on Twitter and said all sorts of things. We had interactions that went on for days because at first I thought they were hacked because I couldn't believe that the Qatari ambassador himself was going after a Georgia state representative related to a finding from this group, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So I just kept playing along, and it went on for a few days, but essentially, and I have it, well, it's all on my Twitter, it's still there. If you search Qatar under my profile, you'll find it. But essentially, they were saying that me, should only rely on official sources. And this was right after the whole airplane from Qatar was news. So this is late January. And I said, well, with all due respect, I don't have to listen to official sources. I can choose whatever sources I find credible to be credible. And so I'm a lawyer. I don't just read crazies on both sides. I know how to analyze something. I know how to look for original sources. And I was very comfortable with what FDD had done in order to report that. So they started saying, well, look at the great things Qatar has done, including help returning our hostages. To which, of course, I responded, you can't claim credit for returning hostages that you helped fund the hostage taking of. Well, they didn't like that very much. We went back and forth until a friend of mine had put something out and she was trying to defend me. And because the deputy had also joined in, so it's both of them now. And then they said, well, you're spreading misinformation like you people always do. So we knew it would get to the you people do real quick, and it got there. So, of course, I said, I know what that means, what you people means. Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt weighed in and said, that's classic anti-Semitism. And to which they apologized and, oh, I love the Jews. I have friends who are Jews, all the same things we always hear from anti-Semites. And anyway, so we knew it wasn't so much what they were saying, but that they were paying attention to this report and trying to diminish it, not by going after the actual facts, but by trying to delegitimize the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, of which I wasn't having any part of because I know they're credible. So I said, well, obviously we're onto something because you wouldn't come at me, a Georgia state representative, if this wasn't accurate. And so at that point, I was aware that the Georgia Solidarity Network, which is a new PAC, essentially for Jewish and pro-Israel issues in Georgia, had talked about filing a bill like this. So I called them. When we got in touch, we're all friends. And I said, look what's happening. They saw it. They were about to file or ask us to file a bill, but they had done the research and came up with a draft. So we took it through Legislative Council. And when I say we, I mean myself, Representative Houston Gaines, a Republican from the Athens area, who's actually now running for Congress against an anti-Semite in his primary. So that's a discussion for another time. But we went through Legislative Council and we presented it. Now, at the time we presented it, we didn't really want to get the attention of the Qataris because we didn't want any interference from anybody. We didn't want them to hire lobbyists to start coming after us. And we got it through pretty quietly through the House. And then it made it through crossover day, which was March 6th. Actually, I don't remember. It's the 26th day of the session. And then it needed to make it to the Senate. In that time, it went through committees. And it also went through changes from the original draft. And I can go through those more specifically. It gave them more teeth. It originally had all sources of foreign funding, no matter the amount, from any source. Well, the colleges and universities whose job it is to do these reports, who already have to report for certain criteria, although not as broad as this, said this is going to be impossible if we have to do it from every source. So, because that would include students, foreign students paying tuition, that would include exchange, legitimate exchange programs. And from every country in the world were close allies and adversaries, and it really would have put an incredible administrative burden on them. So they asked us to pare it back. So we ended up limiting it to countries of concern. And how we defined those included Qatar. So we had the normal, Cuba, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all of those, plus ones that border monarchies or are a monarchy themselves that have money going through a royal family. Because we know that QFI is a American company, but it's funded by the Qatari royal family. So we didn't want an entity to just change where they're registered in order to avoid this kind of detection. So we made it tight enough and broad enough to respect the wishes of the university system and make it have teeth. This version also has an enforcement provision. The state can cut off funding if there's a violation of the law. I think you have two mistakes, and then you're going to lose funding and you get fined. So there are real teeth to this measure. But this was really a joint project from Georgia Solidarity Network, Rep. Houston Gaines, myself, John Carson, who many of you may know from his work with me on the adoption of the
IHRA.
Remembrance Alliance definition into Georgia law. And I just want to clear something up because resolutions mean different things in different states. In Georgia, this is a bill. This isn't a resolutions we put to honor people, or we do it for a policy preference. It has very little weight in Georgia, a resolution on its own. This was legislation which went through the House and Senate. It is sitting on Governor Brian Kemp's desk. He has until May 12th to either veto it or sign it, or it goes into law if he doesn't veto it. We haven't heard, you can't presume anything. I was actually at a bill signing yesterday for one of the companion bills to this, which was to provide a K through 12 and college Title VI coordinator, because what we were seeing, parents are seeing lots of incidents of anti-Semitism. And depending on where you go to school, what county, what principal, I thought I turned this ringer off. It depends on, how it's treated. So yesterday's bill signing was for Senate Bill 523, which I was involved with. This is the governor's pen, or the signing, one of the signing pens. And we're hoping to get one of those for HB 1379 as well. That's like the big picture of it. There's minutia that as sausage gets made in the legislature, but I don't know if you want to questions but this is essentially what it is. God willing, we're going to have the governor sign this before May 12th.
And you said it's until May 12th you just said it, May 12th for the deadline for Governor Kemp.
He doesn't have to sign it, but as long as he doesn't veto it, it goes into law if he doesn't sign it.
Got it. I have a feeling he's probably going to spearhead this to go to the finish line. I feel very, very, very confident about it, but you never know. And, it's always important that we give all the players involved here all the credit they deserve. So, I know in the beginning you said you worked with the Georgia Solidarity Network. The whole theme of radicalization in schools is such a prevalent issue. It's constantly resurfacing. We hear different incidents on a near daily basis at this point. What was the driving factor when you were pushing out this resolution? Was this, beyond just the online criticism, of Qatar, were there people reaching out to your district, to other representatives saying, hey, we need to look into this specific issue?
I was hearing from lots of stakeholders wondering where this is coming from. where this anger on campuses was coming from in Georgia, along with the rest of the country. And by the way, Georgia received a lot more application. The schools within Georgia received a lot more admissions applications after October 7th because of the way the state handled whatever protests there were on a couple of the campuses. They were quelled very quickly. They didn't permit encampments to sit there. They were taken down immediately. So Georgia has taken a lot of pride in the way it has handled the unrest on campuses since October 7th. And people were concerned, where is this coming from? And why did it happen so quickly before Israel had ever responded to the events of October 7th? Where is this coordination coming from? So people were wondering, but weren't sure. But really, the report from FDD came out after we started session. So there was some talk about doing this before, but it really gained momentum once there's some evidence as to why we really need it and why it's important. So private schools fund, parents have a right to ask who's funding a private school, and they can choose to send their kids there or not. But in public school, you have no choice if you're going to public school and that's where your district is, that's where your school's located, that's where you're going. So parents really have a right to know, and taxpayers have a right to know, what kind of biases are being presented to their children without their knowledge. And so when we were seeing things that people who had gone through this training in Doha were coming back talking about how, praising Yahya Sinwar or suicide bombings are not so bad. You're like, what is happening? So this was kind of a validation of what we had already thought, but without the evidence, I'm a lawyer, without the evidence, you have nothing. A hunch is a hunch, but you can't move on that without actual evidence.
So, Rep. Panitch, basically, we want to see this spearheaded nationally in various states, obviously, with certain laws being a big factor into what we need to observe, as well as, various other, what's the word I'm looking for? Not sunshine laws.
What kind of transparency?
It's transparency laws, yes. So let's say I were to assemble a group of volunteers. Let's say I have 5 committed people that want to call their elected officials, talk to their staff, and discuss the issue at hand. Ideally, I would be targeting elected officials that would either be on the fence about it, preferably. When you spoke to your colleagues or any elected official in the state house, regardless of which side of the aisle, what has been the driving cell that has gotten the most amount of buy-in? And, it doesn't even have to be just, your Democratic colleagues, but even your Republican colleagues. What is the effective messaging, that people can tell a campaign staff, or not even a campaign staff, like a congressional staff or a state house staff, a state senator staffers? What's been like the driving or the language that has driven the most success and driven buy-in?
It's foreign influence. So we know that there was foreign influence in our elections. To what degree, what country?
Mm-hmm.
We know that there's foreign influence. You can see it on social media, that there are bots, that there are, coordinated, multi-layer attempts to manipulate data, talking points going out immediately. Everyone can see that there's some level of influence. And if it's foreign, Americans have a right to know who. Now, our bill, if it becomes law, does not prevent the funding, but it requires the disclosure. So parents, taxpayers, the state has a right to know who is influencing their teachers and ultimately, through their teachers, their students.
And when the results...
Well, legitimate exchange programs are not an issue, and that's not what we're targeting. But when you're we would never allow, ever, any country to train teachers to say Osama bin Laden was okay or a good guy. right? I mean, that's unacceptable. No taxpayer would be asked to fund something like that.
Right.
Anti-American. This is no different. Praising Yahya Sinwar is no different than praising Osama bin Laden. And so, because all of these are anti-American, they're not just anti-Jewish or anti-Israel, they're anti-American. And so, in our public schools, we should not be promoting foreign talking points that are contrary to our values. Terrorism is a bad thing, and we should not be funding teachers to say otherwise. So it's really as simple as that, that we have a right to know who and what are being taught to our children, what's being taught to our children, by whom, and with what bias, who's backing that information. So it's really, it took no more than that. And then with the whole Qatar thing, my colleagues all saw what was happening in real time. I had to involve the FBI just to let them know, because the Qataris warned me twice to be cautious. So, and I don't, they threatened the wrong person. So, it's just the reaction to the FDD article really blew up the entire thing. Had they not responded, I'm not sure how much of a priority this would have ultimately been for the House or Senate.
Yeah, I mean that in itself was a huge driving factor. I remember, you sharing with me like that tweet, with, the Qatar going after you directly. I mean, obviously it becomes a higher priority in that type of scenario. What have been the most common questions you received from your colleagues, when it comes to this resolution when discussing it with them?
So, are we targeting certain places? Are we targeting places? Are we targeting Muslims? No, we're not. There are plenty of countries who are not in this list, which are Muslim countries. No, the religion of it had nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with it. It's the fact that that monarchies, royal families, are donating so much money to universities in the United States. They want something for it. They're doing it for a reason. What is that reason? Why should, I mean, the questions were, I think it was more just to be cautious that we weren't targeting anybody who are doing legitimate actions, like regular exchange programs. So those were the questions, and obviously it passed both the House and the Senate. So with some really good amendments to the original bill, as is the deliberative process in a legislature. You talk it through. Someone else has an idea because they've dealt with something like this. And we had lawmakers in the House and Senate who had passed other types of foreign funding related bills. And so just not for universities or K through 12. So they helped talk to us and said, hey, this is what I encountered when I was, dealing with my bill a few years ago that didn't end up making it across the aisle, or did. It was, we got a lot of buy-in, and we got a lot of help from our colleagues.
And as a lawyer, just jumping in for a second, as a lawyer, I really have to extend my admiration to the way this bill was written, both because, you need it to pass, so you need people to vote for it, and that's always a matter of compromise on language, but also it's written in such a smart way to withstand most constitutional scrutiny. The most someone could try to argue is overbreadth, but that is likely to fail. So this is very well written. It encapsulates and targets exactly what needs to be gotten, but in a smart way that makes it, while nothing's immune from challenge, it makes it very likely to survive challenge if that ever comes up.
Yes, because there is a compelling state interest in preserving academic independence, research security, intellectual property protection. All these things are legitimate state interests. So we're not going to have a preemption problem by the federal government, and we shouldn't have any type of constitutional issue. So, and it's also content neutral. It's
Hmm.
anyone from these particular countries, but it doesn't say, it's not limited to a particular viewpoint. Everybody needs to disclose from, who fit into these countries. So it is we obviously stand behind this bill. We appreciate everybody's input into it. This was a collaborative team, bipartisan, bicameral team effort. And this is what good things can happen when legislators work together. And I'll just say in state government, at least in Georgia, most of the things we do are bipartisan. We probably have more impact on Georgians' daily lives than anything that happens in DC. And we get to work. We're a part time legislature. We have other jobs. Our job is to work for the people of Georgia when we're in session and obviously otherwise all the time. But it's when people want to do the work, we can do the work.
So, when it comes to direct outreach to elected officials on this matter, what tends to be the conversation starter that immediately grabs their attention? Because I know a lot of elected officials, they have a lot of priorities and responsibilities. How do you get them to pump the brakes and say, we need to take a clear look at this?
Did you know that foreign countries well, for the Democrats, all you have to say is bought President Trump an airplane. That was a Democratic talking point. You can't trust anybody who's going to give you a gift like that.
Yeah.
So now you're finding out that they're in schools. If you say, well, no, now it's not so bad, then really you didn't really care about the Qatari funding the airplane, and it's really now just a partisan thing. So when you just tell people, most people have no idea. I didn't know. I didn't know until the report came out, and I suspected something. So most of the legislators don't know, and I think did you know that the Qataris are, and maybe others, are funding exchange programs for our schools? That is resulting in this maps of Israel being manipulated or being removed entirely. Um, Jewish history being removed from that area. Yahya Sinwar being praised. All the things are kind of shocking, each one of them. And so you put them all together, you see a funding source. It wasn't that hard of a sell, really, once you said, did you know this was happening?
So, what's been the youngest grade of, influence or like any inquiry you might have received where you've seen the spread of Qatari or any foreign influence reach a classroom? Like, what was the youngest grade you've observed in the state of Georgia?
Young, with maps. I mean, it's just I don't remember, it was kindergarten, first grade, but young. I mean, too young any age would be too young to be manipulated by a teacher who's entrusted to teach you truth. So, but I don't remember. I could look, but I just don't remember. But Amana Academy, I think, goes through K through 12. So I know that school was.
So, what would be your best advice when it comes to coalition building and direct outreach, to elected officials nationwide? What do you think would be the healthiest mechanism to grab their attention? And when it comes to coalitions, do you think it would make a stronger case if there's interfaith engagement on this front?
Let me answer the second question first. Yes, because this impacts everybody, regardless of their religion or if they have no religion. This impacts everybody, anybody who goes to public school, which is most kids. Or if you're concerned, even if your kids have aged out, you're concerned about what's being taught because the younger generation will learn in a certain way, and that will be their worldview. And so you don't want to manipulate it. In terms of coalition, well, this happened because we had Georgia specific information. It would have been a lot harder if there was information not from Georgia, but from, Minnesota, let's just say. And I mean, pick any state, Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
and say, it would have been a harder lift to say, well, it's in Wisconsin, it's not here. What do we have to take up time to do with this? Now we'll deal with it if it becomes a problem. So really get with FDD and any other organization that may be tracing money. There are a lot of organizations that trace money, but FDD to me has been the most successful in being able to put the pieces together, at least for us. So I would call them and say, what have you found, if anything? Because your state may have some law against it already, and you don't really have to do the work. Uh, but it's unlikely that they do. We do know that there are some other states that have a similar idea, but they have no teeth in them. So this has teeth.
So I got one more question, and then we can basically take questions from the audience, or Gerard, if you've got any other additional remarks. So I know, according to the bill, that the reporting deadline is July, what is it, 31st, 2027. What happens if a university system or a K-12 school fails to disclose any foreign funding or fails to report, or they have the evidence showing, material funding, but they intentionally do not disclose it? What would have been the repercussions? And I know it's like 1 year down the road and whatnot, a long time, but how can we ensure that elected officials continue to be transparent throughout the reporting process over the next year? Do you think they should consistently provide public updates? Do you think they should do, committee hearings on these issues? What do you think would be the best way to navigate it?
I guess we need to see what the first reports look like, but the Attorney General will be notified in the event that there's an issue, and there's a 30-day cure period. So the university or school has a 30-day ability to make
Pass the deadline?
right. And then once they're notified that there's an issue, then the governing authority can withhold $5,000 or 3 times the amount of that was undisclosed, whichever is greater. So if you have a country giving $100,000 that wasn't reported, then their punishment could be 3 times plus the sanction that could be given by the state, whatever it is, the state can censor. And it'll be harder to get money out of in the state budget for them next year if they're going to fail to disclose. And that's the other one was in here earlier.
We love a good cameo. So I see one question that was written: how do I find out how much foreign funding is going to my state? I asked which state this individual, his name is Benji, wrote, which state are you based out of? So ideally, what would be the mechanism to identify foreign funding, given that there's transparency laws and there's these other routes? But what do you think works best?
Well, I would work smarter, not harder. Call FDD first and see if they have an investigation open to that particular state. They've been very responsive when I've reached out to them. So ask them, hey, do you have any information, any public information or anything you've reported on that relates to this? And then
Washington State is what the guy wrote.
All right.
Washington State.
So I'm not there. I don't know what their laws are, but check with FDD first. If you're already doing something about it, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If not, then go to your university system, contact the chancellor's office and say, how do I find out what foreign funding is being brought here? You can go to your state superintendent of public schools. Every state has their own setup. So whoever the lead for the state is in public education, that's who you want to go to for the lower grades and say, how do I find out? And if they start giving you the runaround, then start dropping open records requests and Freedom of Information Act requests, depending on what your state law is. And ask your elected officials. I promise someone will answer my call generally faster than they will a constituent. So if you can get an elected official to make the call for you, most of these agencies have liaisons who work with legislators. So they will put you in touch with the right person, or put your legislator in touch with the right person, Otherwise, ask your federations, Adar, and Jew Hatred, ask organizations that have a presence because they'll have an ability to get to whomever is in charge and likely get an answer before just somebody, a constituent. It's not the way it should be, but it sometimes is the way it is.
Amazing. I actually just put my email right in the chat for everybody to see. Um, I got another question from Mary. Why did they target Georgia?
I don't know. That's not an answer we have yet. Maybe because there was no transparency law.
Mm.
But that's a really good question. And I expect we're going to figure that out at some point, just not yet. So we're like stopping the bleed, and then we'll go deeper in to try to figure out why. But that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to.
And it's also worth pointing out that this is a nationwide issue that we're seeing with whether it's with Qatar or with other entities. They're not limiting it to just Georgia. You see these teacher training programs and funds coming into everywhere from K to 12 programs in the suburbs of Boston to Oklahoma community colleges to schools in Washington State. I remember that QFI did have a teacher training program up there at one university a few summers ago. So this is part of a systemic issue. It's not just Georgia. Georgia's being, I mean, as Representative Panich said, this is why you need good disclosure laws, good FOIA laws, good public records laws, transparency laws, and some states don't have them as robust. But ultimately, this is part of a massive effort by Qatar to go and infiltrate American schools. So it's not just limited to Georgia. This is why we need legislation like this everywhere.
And it will also have a deterrent effect if they realize these bad actors, and not just Qatar, there are lots of them. If they realize that they're going to have to disclose, it makes them think, is this worth it? And it may not be if they have to really start opening their books. And before the next question, my mom is on here and it was her birthday yesterday. So I love you, Mom. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mama Panich.
I don't know if she can't talk, but I know she's saying hi.
It's amazing. Mary Roth writes, "Happy birthday, your daughter is amazing." That's so sweet. Disregard my question about defensive democracies.
I do that. If I may, I have a question, not to put you on the spot, and but I'll put it out there anyway. One of the issues that I've complained about for years at the federal level, which there is no answer, a good answer at the federal level because it's a state issue, is we know that money's coming into these schools. We know that they're being used by the schools, but we don't know how they're being used. We don't know the material that they're putting into the schools. That's the second part of this. For example, Georgia has the Parents' Bill of Rights. I think it's what 22786 of Georgia Code. There is a lot of transparency into the primary education materials that parents are entitled to get from their schools. To see the materials, the primary materials that are being provided to their kids. Every state has, or almost every state has a similar type of disclosure where parents are entitled to get information about the curriculum their kids are learning. But sometimes there's a disconnect between what's shown to them and materials such as may come from QFI or foreign sources that are not going to be disclosed because they're not considered primary materials or they're not considered to be part of the core curriculum. What I'm getting at is that it's possible for parents to know that money is coming into their school, but not know what materials are being produced or how they're being used. What do you think about a next step in amending that Parents' Bill of Rights to include more things as primary materials to aid disclosure?
I think more disclosure is always a good thing. When people are trying to hide something, there's a reason. And so to me, open it all. I don't have any problem with that. And I think it's okay. I mean, I think where you get to problems is what level parents have to veto certain things. We see this with school books. We actually had a bill which would criminalize librarians if they had books in the wrong section. I mean, it didn't pass, but it can lead to more extreme things. So we walk a fine line between transparency, knowledge, and the ability to change something. So, but you can't try to even change something if you don't know what's happening. So this is the first step. I have a feeling there might be litigation next if we're seeing that foreign governments are trying to manipulate our students. There may be some level of litigation. I don't do that kind of work, but that's definitely a possibility of a next step. I'm not saying we have a lawsuit. I'm not involved in any related to this bill, but if there are going to be if we're going to discover things, we don't know what we don't know yet. So we're still getting information in. FDD is still getting information in. We think this is the tip of the iceberg. So we have to see what comes out. And then we can pivot to whatever needs to be done next. But this was like an emergency. We're going to stop this. We're going to stop this now. We're going to get control over what we can, which is learning where this information is coming, where this money is coming from, and why.
So, speaking of money, this is actually a really interesting question from Melissa. How is $10,000 threshold determined for the Senate bill, and is there a lower threshold you would have wanted?
The original bill had no threshold. It was any money. As the colleges were pointing out, that also would include foreign students paying tuition. And so that type of reporting would really get way more in the weeds than the administrations of the school wanted. And they don't really tell us what to do, but we take their input seriously. And for now, this was the compromise that we reached. That doesn't mean things won't change moving forward or can't change moving forward. But we had to move the ball. We had to get into the field, and this was the way to do it.
Let's see. Do we have any additional questions? No, nothing new as of yet. Do you think $10,000 would be a good default threshold for other states? If they don't have any similar similar bills that are already put forth?
Yeah, because I think it covers or it captures what a teacher training in a foreign country would cost, because you need to fly. So a lot of these are done, teachers going to the host country, like Qatar, touring, doing teacher training there, and learning content, the curriculum, and how to bring back lesson plans to teach the kids. So
in many states, people have the right to see what's in their syllabi. They have those transparency laws in effect where you can easily see what's being taught in the classroom, what's being taught in the long run. Part of what makes advocacy successful is having your students or grandchildren, nieces, nephews, whoever, constantly show you what's going to be brought forth. We've had cases where we've brought, various incidents in college campuses centered on syllabi materials to the House Committee on Education and the Workforce on both the Democratic and Republican sides. It's obviously critical that we see what's there, but, let's say, let's say you're a college student, okay, and you see something in your syllabi for your semester, for your course, and you have a professor who's radically anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. What would be the giveaway? What would be a key thing that you would identify on a syllabi that would make someone point to the potential of foreign funding to the university? What is something we've seen, from your example, or something that you could provide as an example of something that you've seen in a syllabi specifically where you were able to draw a connection saying, oh, this was being brought forth by this country, if such a thing, if that were the case. Is there a distinct connection between syllabi and that?
I'm not the education expert in terms of curriculum at higher education or even higher education. That's just not my area of expertise. But what I will say is that anything that is wrong, historically wrong, anything that you have been taught earlier that is now being contradicted by a college professor, look into it. Fact is fact. So if they're changing facts, if they're removing, for Jews, if they're removing legitimacy or the connection between Jews and Israel, if they're, using terms that you are loaded terms that that you've been taught, hopefully, are not, don't jive with what you know, then look further into it. If it seems suspicious, do some digging.
Here's a good question. What about the disclosure of the entities providing educational content and not money?
That's an excellent point. In Georgia, most of those are money based. So for them to provide the educational content, um, I haven't seen it where it hasn't been funded, but anything we see, we're going to keep moving. This isn't just because we've passed the law, assuming the governor signs it, doesn't mean it's over. This is really just the beginning of what we can, once we start seeing the results, then we can move forward with different, depending on what the issues are, we can move forward.
Got it. So right now we have about 5 minutes left, and as many of you all watching can see, I actually put my email address within the chat, in the Zoom chat, so everybody can see. It's adar@endjewhatred.com. So as far as next steps go, for those who are watching, it is critical we bring this forth, to your respective states. I want to be the driving force that helps you get this across the finish line. So please, please, please email me whenever, you have the inquiries, the insight, the knowledge, and we'll even get in touch with FDD as well. We work pretty closely with them. And it's not even just FDD, but numerous partner organizations that center on this, including educational, teacher-led coalitions, partner organizations, you name it. We want to be a good asset, and we have the resources to help you. So please, write down my email in the Zoom, in the Zoom chat below. Here, let's see. Yes, the meeting is recorded for those who couldn't make it. We'll make sure we get it to you all in our mailer. Gerard, Representative Panitch, what are your final takeaways? Gerard, you go first.
My final takeaways is that this Georgia bill is long overdue, and that it is an excellent start, and every other state needs to follow in Georgia's footsteps. We need more laws like this. We need transparency. We need to know what sources are coming into our schools and being used to teach our kids, because we're all too familiar with the problem of indoctrination. So we need bills like this, but more importantly, we need parents to be active. We need them to go to school board meetings, go to their schools and ask these questions, because you know what? They're entitled to know. They have a legal right to know what their kids are doing in school. So it's time to start exercising that right and finding these things out, because the more information we have, the more we can do to stop this indoctrination, stop this radicalization, and protect not just the Jewish community, but American democracy.
Right. And mine is knowledge is power. If you don't know what's going on, then it's hard to change anything. You need to know, and a lot of it comes from parents just saying, "Hey, my kid brought home a homework assignment that I think is anti-Semitic because it removes Jews from Israel or whatever it is." Take it to people who can do something about it. So I'm grateful that I'm in a position that I can do something about it and not just get frustrated with what is happening. But people who want to work together can do a lot of really good things for a lot of people.
Amen. That being said, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. As I mentioned, we will be sending this webinar out via mailer. Use my email, reach out to myself, reach out to Representative Panitch, reach out to the End Jew Hatred movement. We want to see this move forward, and we want to be the coalition builders nationwide to help get this to the finish line. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you for taking your time, and we're going to make some serious change. This is only the beginning. This resolution is a landmark for something extraordinary that could come at the federal level.